Thank you all for tuning in today for our webinar about the new draft planning scheme. Before we begin, I'd like to let you know that this session will be recorded. This recording will only capture our presentation materials and myself. Your faces, names, and other details will not be shown, and your privacy will be protected. We'll be posting this webinar to our Shape Your Ipswich website next week, so you'll be able to revisit any of the content covered today or share with others that may be interested. Ipswich City Council respectfully acknowledges the traditional owners as custodians of the lands and waters we share. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, as the keepers of the traditions, customs, cultures, and stories of proud peoples. My name is Danielle, and I'm the Principal Policy Lead for the new Ipswich Planning Scheme project. I'm here today to explain why planning matters, who's responsible for planning in Ipswich, what the planning scheme is and how it could affect you, and where to find more information. We're hoping to hear feedback from people across Ipswich about the planning scheme. This can be what you like about the scheme, what you don't like, what you would change and what you would add. I'll also be walking you through how you can have your say by lodging a formal submission. Since today's session is about providing general information, we won't be able to answer specific questions about the planning scheme or a particular property or properties. However, we encourage you to share your questions in the chat. Our team will be monitoring this and we'll come back to you via email with a considered response. Depending on your feedback, we may also adjust some of our website content to ensure additional information can be provided to the community. So what is the purpose of planning? Why do we plan and why does it matter? Land use planning aims to manage how our neighbourhoods and cities grow and change in a way that benefits people, places, the environment and our economy. This requires balancing and reconciling different people's needs for housing, jobs, places to enjoy and what our services, transport and environment can support. So why do we need to plan? Why does it matter? As you know, most of you, Ipswich is a key regional growth area for South East Queensland. We're growing and changing at quite a rapid pace. We're a current population of 247,000 people, and we're expected to grow to 535,000 people by 2046. Change is happening and no city stays the same. But when we plan for it, we can have greater choice in where this change happens and how it happens. Planning is long-term, so it can take some time for our plans to become a reality. So who's responsible for planning in our state of Queensland? State and local governments share responsibility for land use planning. The Queensland government focuses on state-wide plans, while local governments focus on plans for their local areas. These plans set the requirements for how land can be developed and outline how areas could change and grow in the future. This guides how the development industry and council can create great places and then deliver the developments we need. The community also play a key role in shaping planning and development by getting involved and commenting on state, regional and local plans, such as our draft planning scheme, as well as proposed developments. The Queensland Government are also responsible for identifying where larger infrastructure is needed across Queensland and in our local government area, such as major roads, hospitals, electricity, major sports facilities, public transport and schools. Ipswich City Council look after infrastructure in our local government area, such as local roads, parks, community land, and water and sewer networks in Ipswich's case are managed and delivered by urban utilities. Major council trunk infrastructure is planned and delivered using our local government infrastructure plan. And we're currently, in parallel to the draft planning scheme, preparing a new LGIP, which will also undertake public consultation in the first part of this year. It's currently with the state government. The purpose of the planning scheme, it's a blueprint for planning and development in our city. It guides the way land and buildings are used, how infrastructure is delivered, and how we balance growth and change with the protection of what matters most to us. Our planning scheme is shaped by the Queensland Government's state planning policy and the South East Queensland Regional Plan shaping SEQ. The state planning policy outlines the state's interests in planning, which guide how we as a council should plan for housing, economic growth, the environment, resilience to natural hazards, and infrastructure. The South East Queensland Regional Plan helps manage future growth in our region, tells us where development can happen, and it sets growth targets for our population and jobs. So what does the draft planning scheme aim to identify? The areas to protect and areas to build on, places to set up businesses or shops, the services our community need, the different types of housing for people to live in, and transport options to move around our city. The draft planning scheme is underpinned by a number of themes. The scheme sets out the future vision for the Ipswich City Council area over the next 20 years and considers how we will create great places for everyone in our local government area, how we're going to plan for the infrastructure we need and where we need it, how to facilitate housing choices for where and how we live, strengthen our resilience to natural hazards and constraints such as flooding and bushfire, conserve and protect our natural environment, resources and heritage, keep our people connected through transport and movement, and importantly, support the growth of our jobs and local economy, and protect the things we value, our heritage and our cultural values. So what makes up the planning scheme? There's many parts that make up the planning scheme. I'd encourage you to have a look on Shape Your Ipswich. But the parts are important to how the planning scheme is read and applied, and it forms a hierarchy of the planning scheme. The strategic framework part sets the overarching strategy and policy direction and vision for our city and acts as a guide for other parts of the planning scheme. The local frameworks in the planning scheme divide our local government area into 30 distinct local areas, reflecting their unique needs and their characteristics of the communities, and make sure that we're considering them in our planning. The categorisation tables in our planning scheme identify which developments require development applications and how these applications are assessed. We have overlay codes that map the land values or the constraints that development may need to respond to, such as natural hazards, difficult topography, bushfire, flooding, or heritage values, the things we want to protect now and for the future. The zone codes map how different land use, how land can be used, and the types of buildings or activities that can occur. Our LGIP forms part of the planning scheme and identifies what the priority infrastructure is that's needed for our future growth and development. We have development codes that apply to specific uses, such as dwelling houses, or types of activities, such as subdivision or earthworks. And there are also other plans, such as the Springfield Structure Plan and the Ripley Valley Development Scheme for other parts of our city. So how could the new planning scheme affect you? Planning schemes are the main rule book for determining what new development should occur in our local government area and how. The new planning scheme won't change the existing lawful use of a property, but it could influence how you, your neighbours or others use or develop a property in the future. The zone and overlay codes and mapping can be used to see what activities or development will be allowed or not allowed in different areas. So what do we use zoning mapping codes for? To make sure the right buildings and services end up in the right places. Almost all land within the planning scheme is included in what's called a zone. Each zone has a set of rules guiding how properties are used and what types of buildings, services and activities can occur. There are different types of zones for different areas. For example, residential zones are for different types of housing where people live, supported by local parks and services. Centre zones can be for a mix of activities, including businesses where people work and shop. In some cases, there may actually be multiple zones that affect one particular property. To make zones easier to understand, we've introduced some changes in the new draft planning scheme, which is publicly on display. This includes new zone names and descriptions. These follow the mandatory requirements of the planning legislation in Queensland. We have fewer zones and we have less complex zone codes. In addition to this, we've created a series of zone cards that are available on our Shape Your Ipswich page that break down the type of developments that are expected in each zone, what's unlikely to be approved, and what council might consider when assessing a development application. Zoning maps also play an important role in the development application process. They're used in conjunction with the categorisation tables in our planning scheme to determine the categories of development assessment and the relevant benchmarks or requirements that we have for accessible development. So we referred to overlay mapping and codes. So what are these? Overlays are layers on maps that show where additional planning considerations may be needed for a property. For example, natural hazards such as flooding, landslide, or bushfire. Areas impacted by constraints like heavy pipelines or past underground mining, and areas that might have heritage or environmental values that need to be considered. They also play a role in how developments are assessed and should be considered alongside the zoning of a property. Most include codes that guide and set specific requirements for development. This ensures all impacts to development have been considered, including building designs and materials that increase resilience and assist recovery. Overlays may impact part or all of a property. There may also be multiple overlays that may affect an individual property. Because overlay maps are developed using the most relevant information available, there have been changes made to some overlay mapping in the new planning scheme. We'll be providing more detail on some of these changes in the upcoming webinars in our series. The natural hazards one in particular is coming up on the 31st of May. So let's dive a little bit deeper and look at a property. You can, as I said, go onto the Shape Your Ipswich website and you can view the zones and overlays that apply to a particular property or properties and the wider Ipswich area. And you can actually read the relevant parts of the planning scheme that apply to your relevant property that you are inquiring about. So I encourage you now as we take a step through with some screenshots as to how you go through this process. So first, we'd head to council shapeyouripswich.com.au new Ipswich planning scheme page. You'd scroll down the page until you see the view the draft planning scheme and mapping. You can select this to be taken to the draft Ipswich Plan 2024 page. Now you're ready to search for your property. And I should say also this can be accessible from your mobile phone as well, should you be out in the field or wish to access the information that way as well. Once you type in your address, it will show up above the search bar as an option to select. On the left-hand side of the page, you can view information about your property, including the zones and overlays that apply. For example, this property is in a principal centre zone. You can use the checkboxes to select or unselect any mapping layer. Below the zone, there is a link to view the relevant section of the planning scheme. Selecting this will take you to the section on that zone code so you can read more about its purpose and how it applies to development. Hit the back button when you're ready on your browser to return to the planning scheme mapping. You can select Map Tools on the right-hand side of the page to view all the different zones and overlays that apply in the city and where they apply across our local government area. Underneath is a legend, which shows what each of the layers look like and the relevant colours that apply. This helps you easily see where different layers apply across the map. For a PDF property report of the information, select View Property Report on the left-hand side of the page. And displayed is what the output is of the property report. It has specific details as to the planning scheme requirements that apply to your particular property that you searched. So I'll just go back to making a submission, and this is the really important part about having a planning scheme on public consultation. We want to hear from you. We encourage you to provide your feedback on the draft planning scheme. And the best way to do this is by making a formal submission. Your submission can voice support, it can raise concerns, or it can provide suggestions for all or part of the proposed draft planning scheme and mapping. To make it count, we ask that you provide your submission before the consultation period closes on Sunday, the 16th of July of this year. The easiest way to make a submission is online through shapeyouropswich.com.au, but you can also lodge your submission by post, in person, or via email if you're wishing to do that. So how to make a submission? We do want to hear from you, so we're just going to step you through that process. So to make your submission online, head to shapeyouropswich.com.au, select the new planning scheme project page, scroll down the page until you see the Make a Submission button. Select this to be taken to the submission page, which includes a template that you can fill out. Before you begin, we recommend reading the How to Make a Submission fact sheet. It's got lots of handy hints in there to help you prior to you actually completing a submission to council. And we've included a link on that page. If your submission relates to a specific property, make sure you enter the street address of the lot so we can find the property referring to. Next, select any topics or parts of the planning scheme that your submission relates to. You can also provide your written submission. Make sure you include any supporting grounds, facts, and circumstances. And we've also provided the ability to also upload any supporting materials that you may want to submit to council in addition to any written comments that you've made. Before submitting, we'll ask you to tell us a bit more about yourself and provide some contact details. You will receive an acknowledgement from us of your submission, but once all the submissions have been received during our consultation period, we'll then get back to you to let you know how your feedback has been considered by council alongside all the other submissions that have been received. And now you're ready to submit through the submission button. So what other engagement activities do we have? We want you to know that we have 3 webinar sessions that we'll be holding. This is the first of the 3. What is the planning scheme? We've got the Open Space and Environment webinar coming up on the 29th of May, and the Natural Hazard, which will be focusing on bushfire and flooding on the 31st of May. And this session today has been more of an introductory session, but these 2 sessions will go into a bit more detail about these 2 key topics in the planning scheme. We're also running 4 drop-in sessions, talk to planner sessions at libraries across our local government area. And we can use these as an opportunity to speak to you one-on-one, planners from our team and yourself, to better understand how the new planning scheme might affect your property and area, and answer any specific property-related or scheme-related questions you might have. So we encourage you to attend the upcoming webinars and also the upcoming targeted drop-in sessions as well that we're offering. A recording of this session is available on Shape Your Ipswich week. We also encourage you to keep an eye on the page for more information on upcoming engagement activities. And for anyone who shares specific questions about your situation or property when registering for this session or in the chat today, Our team will be reaching out to you via email with a response. Lauren, if you're online, I know that you submitted a particular question, and I'm going to ask one of the officers from the area that your question relates just to contact you directly so you can have a conversation with them about that particular project, and very much appreciate your question. So contact us. You can also reach out to our planning team at any time during the consultation. They're taking inquiries, dealing with calls on the phone, in person at the council contact centre on Nicollet Street in our council building. Ask us any questions or have a chat about the draft planning scheme. And as I said, you can contact us over the phone, in email, or in writing. We really want to hear from you and want you to participate and join the conversation about the future of our city. And on behalf of the team and council, thank you today for tuning in to learn more about the draft planning scheme. And we look forward to speaking with you in person or receiving your submission. Thank you and have a nice afternoon.